going on, everybody? Schuyler Callihan here on the Between the Ears show. I'm by myself today, but that's okay. We're going to still have a lot of fun here. West Virginia, it's halfway through Big 12 conference play. So I figured, what the hell? This is like the perfect time to sit back, kind of reflect on where West Virginia is to this point in the season, what they need to improve on. Is it time to panic? And yes, we're going to also dive into predicting the final 9 games of the Big 12 schedule. Let's see if the Mountaineers can make a run. I think they have it in them. It's just a matter of, can they put it all together? Can the consistency be there for this team to take that next step? So let's go ahead and talk about the first, what do we got? 22 games of the season. Okay. Non-conference play goes fairly well. They lost the game to Purdue, but they hung in there for the most part. Purdue's lost one game the entire season. And outside of that loss, that weird loss to Rutgers, I don't know how they lost that game, quite frankly. But outside of that, West Virginia's pretty much given them one of their best games all season long. If you remember, West Virginia at one point, late in the game was very close to making a comeback. So that plus the Xavier loss, that one really hurts. Because you win that game, that's another huge win for the resume. Obviously, it's not a bad loss. West Virginia doesn't have a bad loss to this point, but you win that game, it certainly helps out where you sit in the net rankings. It certainly helps out where you are in the views of the NCAA selection committee, so on and so forth. So losing that one hurts because they had that one locked into their control, very much like the Texas game, very much like the Kansas State game. And I mean, honestly, you could go on and even say, they probably should have won the TCU game this past game. So there's been a number of these games where they probably could be in a much better situation, but things could be worse. Or really could they? I don't think they could. I mean, I think they pretty much did what they were supposed to do in non-con. They beat who they were supposed to beat. They had a couple of quality wins, and I don't know that any of those losses would have really hurt them. Like, say they lost to Florida or somebody like that. I mean, Florida just beat Tennessee, so there wasn't really anything that could have made this worse. Could have been definitely better. From my perspective, offensively, this team, for whatever reason, and this has been like this for years under Bob Huggins, and I think everyone could probably agree to this, there's too much stagnant play on that end of the floor. You've got guys dribbling too much. You've got the ball just sticking. You've got too many guys standing put, not moving around. And the biggest, I think, thing for offense, especially in the college game, more so really than the NBA, to be successful and to have an efficient offense, you have to have flow. You have to have movement. The NBA, you got guys like Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and those types of guys that can just ISO you to death. They don't need all the back cuts, the motions, the screens, the flexes, all that stuff. They just need a guy one-on-one and with space. In the college game, that's not necessarily the case at all, especially with this team for West Virginia. They don't have that type of guy. They don't have a guard that can just beat you off the dribble time and time and time again. And really, if you look at it, the guard play's kind of been underwhelming, at least on the offensive side. Eric Stevenson's gone through that huge shooting slump. Okay, you got Kedrian Johnson, who, yes, he had a couple of 20-point games back to back, but outside of that, he's turned the ball over a lot. Hasn't been quite as good as I thought he was going to be this year, at least offensively. Now, he has done a very good job finishing around the rim, penetrating, and stuff like that. But I felt like he was going to take a step in his three-point shooting this year. I don't have the numbers up right here, but I think he's still living in the 20%. I thought he'd be at least a 30+% shooter this season. And then you look at Joe Toussaint, been very good off the bench, but has a tendency to get a little too happy with the ball, dribbling it too much, and kind of just drains the shot clock. I don't know how many times I've watched Joe Toussaint sit there and dribble the ball and I look at the shot clock and there's like 8 or 9 seconds on the shot clock. I'm like, what is going on here? So for whatever reason, they've got to stop being so stagnant offensively. They've got to figure that out. I don't know what that's going to take. I don't know what that's going to do um, to the flow of what they call, to the flow of the lineups that they put out there. But it might end up being exactly that. It may end up being a lineup change where maybe you go to two bigs and you put a Conquo in the lineup. Hugs kind of hinted at that a couple of days ago. And that might be what the doctor ordered for them, is exactly what he said. So do you go with the lineup that has Jimmy Bell and James Okonkwo in it together? And you also have Trey Mitchell. I mean, that's going to bump Trey to the 3. So now what happens with Emmett? What happens with Eric? What happens with Keidre? So there's going to be someone that has to come out of the lineup, obviously, if you're going to insert James. I don't know that I would be quite ready to do that just yet if I'm Huggins, because I think although he's shown a lot of good things here recently, mainly defensively, but he can do some stuff on the offensive end as well. You got to have a good replacement for Jimmy Bell when he comes off the floor. You can't just turn to Mo Wagee, because that the kid can't stay out of foul trouble. I don't know why that is. He's constantly grabbing, he's constantly holding onto somebody, and he's constantly slapping. It's just he has got to understand, I guess, I guess the boundaries of really his aggressiveness on the defensive end. And he's kind of developed a little bit of a aggressive background in terms of as a defender. So referees are going to be looking for that kind of stuff. They know he fouls a bunch. They know he fouls out at times. So officials know that going into games. They're going to officiate him very closely. You can't have Mo Wagee coming into the game as Jimmy Bell's replacement, immediately picking up 2 fouls in 5 minutes, and then Jimmy's got to go back on the floor, still trying to catch his breath. I think it makes more sense to kind of keep the lineup you have and maybe even go to a 3-guard lineup at some point. I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing for West Virginia to do, but getting Joe Toussaint on the floor has to be a priority. He's got to get more minutes. He cannot disappear in the second half. We've seen it too many times where, he'll lead the team in scoring at halftime with 10, 12 points, whatever the case may be. Second half, we don't see him till the 12-minute mark or maybe even later. That's a problem. And that's still a tough situation because, again, you're dealing with who do you take off the floor, and I don't know where you go with that from there, because you got to have Eric Stevenson on the floor because he can make shots, Keely's defense. I don't know. I think a 3-guard lineup would help, but again, that's kind of the same situation with the substitution stuff on within the front court. With okay, if you go to a 3-guard lineup, you're putting Joe Toussaint out there. Who's going to give Keedy or Joe or Eric a rest? Are you going to Seth Wilson right away? Are you going to Kobe? Regardless, those 2 guys are twos. They're off-ball guards. They're not a true point guard. You don't have that unless Joe Toussaint is coming off the bench. So that's that's a lot of things that Bob Huggins has to figure out. He's got to find that right mix, that right combination of guys, both starting the game and just playing throughout the game as well. They've got to get better starting games too. I mean, to come out and play the way they did against TCU was just kind of mind-boggling. Because Mike Miles, as we mentioned in the Mountaineers Now post-game show with Chris, is that that's a huge opportunity. To win in the Big 12 is extremely hard, and if anybody knows that, it's West Virginia. They've only won 1 game on the road in Big 12 play in the last 2 years. So for them to have that opportunity with the leading scorer out of the lineup, and you got Eddie Lampkin, who is one of the better centers in the league, playing on essentially one leg. You played, 10, 12 minutes. You got to win that game. And they came out sluggish. They came out not focused, not communicating. So that's a problem. And maybe it is turning to a different lineup to start the game just to get up, just to ensure you get out to a better start. And then you kind of find your way with the lineups through that. So I don't know. That's why I'm not the coach. That's why Bob Huggins has won 900 plus some games, and I'm sure he'll figure it out. So, all right, let's go ahead and get to it. The second half of the season. There's 9 games left to go. West Virginia's already played 9 in conference play, and here as we take a look at the standings, West Virginia 2-7, tied for ninth place with Oklahoma. So definitely a lot of work needs to be done before the Big 12 Conference Tournament. Obviously, if you're West Virginia, you want to climb as far as you can and not have to play potentially the number 1 team very early in the tournament. So starting off with Saturday's game at home against Oklahoma, this was a game West Virginia had many, many chances to win out in Norman for so many things that went wrong in that game. They still had a chance all the way. I think Oklahoma, if I remember correctly, led the entire way, but West Virginia had multiple opportunities at the line to get it done, which they went 8 of 16 from, and ended up being a close loss in the end. So I'm going to go with West Virginia. Don't know if it's going to be. It's going to be another close game. Oklahoma's had West Virginia's number here recently. I think they've won 7 straight over the Mountaineers. So I'm going to go West Virginia. They even up the season series, but not 100% confident in that pick. But I am confident in my next pick, and that is the home game with Iowa State. Iowa State is probably the surprise team of the Big 12 and maybe one of the most surprising teams in the country this year. They've got a really good resume, and they too have lost several very close games, and they've won some very close games. So had some of those games gone one way or another, their record could be completely different. They could be, what are they? They're 15-6 right now. They could be an 18 win team, or they could be a 12 win team. So 15-6 sounds about right for them, but they're very good defensively. Probably one of the best defensive teams in the Big 12. I see a split coming for this matchup with West Virginia and Iowa State. So if I'm giving away my pick later on for the final game or next to final game of the schedule, oh well. But going West Virginia here in this one, get the win at home. Then on the road for 2, Texas and Baylor. And I think they're going to drop both of these games. So now we're sitting here in the back half. We've got a win over Oklahoma, win over Iowa State, and now we've got 2 straight losses here against Texas and Baylor. So that's 2-2 in the back 9. Then we're going to go Texas Tech, who got their first league win, by the way. Props to them. Very, very late in the process, but still a team that's going to struggle. They're down a bunch of guys, a bunch of key guys, and I don't know if they're going to get the 3 or 4 wins in Big 12 play. They've got the talent. They still have a lot of very good players, but it's going to be an absolute uphill battle for them. So I'm going to get West Virginia I'm going to go with West Virginia here, getting the season sweep of the Red Raiders, putting them at 3-2 in the back 9. Oklahoma State's another team that just for some reason just gives West Virginia fits. Given that it's at home, and given that this was the game that Eric Stevenson, I don't want to single him out, but I mean, I think he would even admit probably cost West Virginia the game. I think this is a game where he's got circled on his calendar, comes back, puts up a big game, gives West Virginia the win. So West Virginia wins over Oklahoma State. I'm not even going to spend any time with Kansas. I mean, West Virginia's never won at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Don't see it being this year. Chalk that up as a loss. I already mentioned Iowa State being a loss, and I am going to go with a loss to Kansas State to round out the regular season. So that puts West Virginia at 6-12 in Big 12 play. So I think that should be enough. to get into the NCAA tournament. I really do. I think 6 wins in this league, and plus with some of those wins that you're going to get along the way. Like I said, if you beat an Iowa State, you can sweep Texas Tech, who's not that great, but still, Oklahoma State's kind of on the outside looking in right now, but Oklahoma the same thing. But you're going to get 6 wins in the Big 12 conference. You're going to have a big win over Pitt, who's playing really well right now, surprisingly. Um, you got another close to 30-point win over Florida. Another, and really the rest of the non-conference schedule was pretty strong too. So 6 wins in conference play should do it for West Virginia, and that is the game-by-game prediction for the last 9 games of Big 12 play for West Virginia. And yeah, so we'll see what happens. We'll see how wrong I am. We'll come back and revisit this at the end of the season. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Between the Ears. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube at Mountaineers Now. Follow us on Twitter at Mountaineers Now. You can follow me at Callihan_. And as always, we'll have the Mountaineers Now post-game show following West Virginia's game against Oklahoma on Saturday, which is set for a 8 o'clock tip on ESPN2. So it's going to be a late one for us, but we'll be up. If you can't sleep after the game, or you're ready to watch some more stuff about West Virginia Sunday morning, please check us out on the Mountaineers Now post-game show. We're going to dive into everything about that game and what is coming up against Iowa State. So, again, follow us up on Twitter and on YouTube, and we'll see you guys Saturday. Take care.